Welcome to State of the Offense, your source for fantasy football coverage of your favorite team's offense, the Baltimore Ravens. In the skill positions, the Ravens are bringing back all of their main statistical contributors from last season, but they have also added quite a bit to their wide receiver room by signing Odell Beckham Jr. and Nelson Aguilar, and by drafting Zay Flowers. On the offensive line, Baltimore is bringing back 4 of their starters from last year. Ronnie Stanley is back at left tackle for the Ravens. He was the Ravens' highest graded offensive lineman with a 91 grade in 11 games played with 54.9% snap share. Stanley's grade was good enough to be tied with Andrew Thomas of the New York Giants as the 6th best left tackle in the NFL. The left guard position will be open after former starter Ben Powers signed with Denver. The current starter shows to be third-year player Ben Cleveland, who played in 2 games last year and graded at a 67. Cleveland only had an 8.4% snap share. Patrick McCarry is listed as the top backup at left tackle and center for now, but since McCarry is one of the better paid offensive linemen on the team and he has plenty of proven experience, I would expect him to be in the starting 5 at some point. McCarry played in 14 games last year, graded at a 71 with a 34.6% snap share. Tyler Linderbaum had a fantastic rookie year as the Ravens starting center. He graded at a 79. He played in all 17 games with a 99.8% snap share. Linderbaum's 79 grade tied him with Eric McCoy of New Orleans as the 8th best center in the league. Kevin Zeitler is back at right guard for his 3rd season as a Raven. Zeitler was the 2nd highest graded Ravens offensive lineman with an 84. His 84 tied him with Shaq Mason of Tampa Bay as the number 6 right guard in the NFL. He played in 15 games last season with an 87.3% snap share. Zeitler is in a contract year. Morgan Moses returns for his 2nd season as a Raven at right tackle. Moses played in all 17 games with a 93.7% snap share, and he graded at a 78. His 78 was good enough to be in the range of 11 to 13 amongst right tackles in the game. The offensive line has historically been a team strength in Baltimore, and this group follows that legacy. The left guard position might not be locked down yet, but 2 of the competitors for the spot have been in the building with Ben Cleveland and Patrick McCarry. Both 2021 and 2022 were seasons where Jackson only played in 12 games. His touchdown pass totals were in the teens. His completion percentage dropped. He had less yards per attempt, lower quarterback ratings, and less production as a rusher. His combined numbers from 2019 and 2020 were better in every category. He's still a dynamic player who can dominate a game, but his drop-off statistically is noticeable. And fantasy football, after all, is all about the stats. If you look at Lamar, you have to think that his game won't age very well unless he finds the production level as a passer he had in 2019. The Ravens also made a strategic effort as an organization to invest more into the wide receiver position. In fantasy, Lamar Jackson was the quarterback 17 in total points, but he was quarterback 6 in points per game average. Even in a down year, Lamar Jackson is good enough to put you into championship contention as a top 6 quarterback. Jackson is the quarterback 5 in average draft position now, player 34 overall, which makes him a late 3rd rounder. I rank Jackson as my number 20 overall player, so I like him more than most drafters, but I also recognize that there's a risk with Lamar. Part of the strategy in fantasy is to balance upside and risk. You need guys to produce points at a high level, but you also need them to play consistently for as many weeks as possible. If you are one of the quarterback drafters who love going for a rushing quarterback, you have to think that they are just as likely to get hurt as a running back. The human body can only take so much punishment, and if you're carrying the ball in the NFL, eventually the hits and the wear and tear will catch up to you, whether you're a running quarterback, a running back, or a high-volume receiver. Usage gives way to injuries. If you draft any running quarterback, I recommend that you get 3 running quarterbacks on your roster rather than just 1 additional quarterback. The roster spot used on a 3rd quarterback helps you more than what a 5th wide receiver, 2nd tight end, or 2nd defense will help. Plus, if you have 3 point-scoring quarterbacks, it is less likely that one of those guys will take you out in the playoffs from another fantasy team. Hoard quarterbacks who run the ball, and you will have an advantage over the rest of the league. If you only draft a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson and they get hurt, and all you have to depend on is a guy like Desmond Ridder, you will not win your league. What if you draft, say, Lamar Jackson with Deshaun Watson and or Daniel Jones? If you know how to manipulate the average draft position, you should be able to find values at the other positions and then stack these types of running quarterbacks. If one of them misses time, you're still good to go with your lineup. The Ravens made numerous additions to the wide receiver position this offseason. Odell Beckham Jr. is a proven veteran wide receiver, but you must also be aware that Odell hasn't had a 1,000-yard season since 2019. He's only had one 100-reception season in his career. He hasn't scored 10 touchdowns in a season since 2016. Odell is getting drafted as the wide receiver 40 at position 95. Is Odell Beckham really worth drafting in this tier? I rate Odell as my 124th player overall, so I think that he's getting overdrafted by 2.5 rounds. Rashad Bateman's foot injury has him on the PUP list for training camp. Bateman has only played 19 games over 2 seasons in the NFL. He's only scored 3 touchdowns in those 19 games. He's still only 23, and he was a recent first rounder, so he is a talent and he has potential, but no one is drafting him highly anymore. He is the wide receiver 58 drafted and the 143rd player overall. Because of his talent, I currently rate Bateman as the 118th player. He can exceed where I rank him, but take advantage of Bateman's low ADP as a bit of a lottery ticket. 2023 first-round draft pick Zay Flowers from Boston College has a nice skill set for a young receiver. He's very good with the ball in his hands, and he's going to fight for the jump ball. Flowers is currently the 52nd wide receiver drafted at pick 125, which makes him an 11th rounder. I think that he can easily exceed pick 125 production, but I'm rating him a bit lower. I have him at the 141st overall player going into draft season. Flowers may end up being the number 4 target in the passing game behind Mark Andrews, Odell Beckham Jr., and Rashad Bateman. Being the number 3 or the number 4 option in Baltimore is not that lucrative for fantasy football points. Devin Duvernay and Nelson Aguilar are also proven NFL players at the position who may get some starts this season, but they don't offer much in fantasy football, but they do take away production from guys like Beckham, Bateman, and Flowers. Tight end Mark Andrews is viewed as the second best tight end in the NFL by many experts. In 2021, he was a tight end 1 over Travis Kelce, but last year he slipped to tight end 4 in total points, and he was a tight end 3 in points per game. He is currently the second tight end getting drafted. Andrews was the only Raven to secure over 100 targets in the passing game last year, so he is a rarity. He is a tight end who is the number 1 receiving option on his team. I don't expect this to change. As the tight end 2, Andrews is the 29th player in ADP, which makes him a 3rd rounder. He's currently going 19 spots ahead of George Kittle, who was better than him last year. I would recommend drafting a running back and George Kittle later as being a better value than drafting Mark Andrews in the 3rd round. The Ravens bring back 3 familiar faces at the running back position with J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and Justice Hill. They also signed Melvin Gordon to compete with Justice Hill and Gus Edwards for the backup job. J.K. Dobbins has had a tough recovery from his knee injury that he suffered in 2021, but there are reasons to be encouraged by Dobbins' potential. Dobbins played 4 games early in the season where he only averaged 3.5 yards per carry. After an 8-week rehab, Dobbins returned with a vengeance and averaged 7 yards per carry in 4 games near the end of the year. Dobbins has only caught 25 passes in his career, so he's not very valuable in PPR formats. Dobbins is currently the 20th running back getting drafted at the 53rd spot overall. J.K. Dobbins is getting drafted in the 5th round. Dobbins has never had a heavy workload in his career. He's under 10 carries per game for his career. He doesn't catch very many passes. Part of that reason is that the Ravens have split carries pretty evenly between Dobbins and Gus Edwards for their entire careers. Edwards is not as talented as Dobbins, and Dobbins has been a better fantasy player, but their career workloads have been very similar. For their careers, Dobbins has averaged 9.8 carries per game, and Edwards has averaged 9.6 carries per game. Their total receptions in their careers, Dobbins has caught 25 passes, and Gus Edwards has caught 18. I have Dobbins as my number 80 player overall because of running back scarcity, so I rate him 27 spots lower than his ADP, and I recommend staying away from him. Gus Edwards is not getting drafted until the 166th spot as a running back 51. The Baltimore Ravens don't treat J.K. Dobbins like he's 9.5 rounds better than Gus Edwards, so I would say that you shouldn't treat Dobbins 9.5 rounds better than Gus Edwards either. Because of the volume of running backs in Baltimore, plus Lamar Jackson's running game factoring in, I would not draft Edwards either. Melvin Gordon and Justice Hill complicate the Ravens' backfield even more, to where I recommend staying away from all Ravens running backs. Everyone knows that fantasy football production is limited in Baltimore, and it always has been. Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews are the only early draft picks for fantasy from the Ravens. There are some intriguing names on the roster like Odell Beckham Jr., Rashad Bateman, and J.K. Dobbins, but the way Baltimore has traditionally split their workloads at running back and wide receiver, none of the running backs or wide receivers are worth their draft positions. Zay Flowers can exceed his draft range with his production, but he may not pop until later in the year. The Ravens are as solid as any team in the league, and their ceiling is always the Super Bowl. Their floor is usually a team that barely misses the playoffs. As they do every year, the Ravens will have something to say about the conversation on who the best team in the AFC is. If you like today's coverage of the Baltimore Ravens offense, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.